In 2025, I read a total of 62 books, which was my best reading year ever. And to wrap it all up, I'm going to summarize it with my go-offs. Like, Go Off, that was a really good book. And my piss-offs. My go-offs are generally my 5-star reads. It's really the books when I think about reading back in 2025, these are the books that come to mind. These are in no particular order, but if I were to think back on 2025 and think about the one book that really sticks out for a very multitude of reasons, it would have to be In the Veins of the Drowning by Kaylee Cassidy. I know I've talked about this book so much. I still echo what I've said like in my big long review back in the summer. Had been such a long time since aromantasy had ignited the feelings in me that I felt in here. Full-blown spirals, wanting to pick apart every single detail like in the best way possible, immediately theorizing how the next book was going to go, discovering one of my all-time female main characters in Imogen. I had the added fun of then forcing Chloe to read it so that we could both scream about it together. By reading this book and through the process of reading this book, I've also been able to gain a new friend in Kaylee, which has been obviously a blast. So needless to say, it really cemented itself in my 2025 on so many different levels. If you haven't read it yet and you're into romantasies, but maybe not the standard run-of-mill romantasies that have been coming out as of late, I would implore you to check it out. Atmosphere, the magic with consequences, with characters that I find to be imperfect but extremely realistic, the whole range of motivations. Sometimes I make some morally ambiguous decisions, but I support Imogen's rights, but I also support Imogen's wrongs. Go off, Kaylee. Really did it with this one. Quick honorable mention to In the Wake of the Ruin, which is the upcoming sequel and finale to In the Veins of the Drowning. I was very fortunate to read an early draft version of it, which lives permanently in this binder. And this early draft version did everything I wanted the sequel to do. I know Kaylee has done even more to it since this version that I read, so I can't wait to read the final version of it when it comes out this summer. There's probably a handful of books in 2025 that made me cry. This was first one and probably the most dramatic, most impactful. I basically cried through the entire duration of this book. So this is We Could Be Rats by Emily Austen. It's been described as a love letter to childhood, but we're basically following Sigrid as she is telling her life story to her sister, and the fact that, despite they were raised by the same parents in the same house, she feels like they had very different upbringings and they came on completely different life trajectories. Touches a lot on like the not fun reality of becoming an adult. I mean, that moment when you wake up one day and realize that you kind of lost all your childhood imagination. You realize that your parents are not these perfect, infallible creatures. Just a lot. It was a lot. It really is a standout for me, and I strongly recommend it. And also a Canadian author, which is always. On the topic of Emily Austen, I do want to give an honorable mention to Is This a Cry for Help? Her next novel that is actually coming out just in a couple weeks, I think. If that one was a love letter for childhood, this is like a love letter to libraries, but also about, coming to terms with yourself, mental illness, doing what's right for you, and just another really, really good one. Another highlight of 2025 for me was Wings of Starlight by Alison Saft. This was a prequel story based on The Secret of the Wings, which was a Tinkerbell movie. It follows side characters that were introduced in that movie that were hinted at as to having this forbidden love affair because she was a warm fairy and he was a winter fairy. Going into this as a prequel novel and knowing where these two characters are at the start of the movie, I knew this was going to be painful. Like, I knew that. I knew exactly how this was going to go. And yet, this was an ugly crying one, like hardcore ugly crying. I was stoked when I saw that Alison Saft was the one who was writing this. She did an absolutely phenomenal job with it in terms of expanding the lore, putting things in there for people who are familiar with the Tinkerbell stories and movies, but also still making it readable for those people who are not familiar at all and are maybe just picking this up. I think it's a great depiction of love versus duty, as a ruler having to make the decision between what would be best for your entire people versus what would be best for you, and how do you make those really difficult decisions. And if you have watched the movies, you know how it ends, but I think if you haven't, you might be kind of surprised by how it ends, because I feel it's a very hard-hitting, bittersweet ending. When you finish, I highly recommend rewatching Secret of the Wings just to feel some happiness, but also I ugly cried through that too, so. A common theme you'll probably see about books that really stick out in my mind is like the reading experience that I have with a book, and Immortal is another one of those ones that like I can picture basically every minute of myself reading this one. It was the second book that I read in 2025. I had gotten an advanced audiobook from Libro FM, and Chloe had actually just finished reading it, and I had never read a book by Sue Lin Tan before, so I haven't read Daughter of the Moon Goddess yet. I will get there. And I really had no idea what to expect going into this. You don't need to have read those books to understand what happens in this book, by the way. But I had a long day working in the lab, and I just remember I had my headphones in, listening to the audiobook of this, and I was just so enthralled, hanging on to every last word. I say this every time I talk about this book, but the less that you go into this knowing, like, the absolute better, because when the things happen that happen, I lost my mind. After I was done the lab, I ran to the bookstore, got a physical copy so that I could have like the physical version to read while like listening to it, because I just knew I needed to see those words on page. Like, I just knew that that last 25% was going to do unspeakable things to me. And it did. Which, on the topic of Sue Lin Tan, I want to throw in another honorable mention, which is Never Ever After. This is the first book in her new YA trilogy that just came out in October. This was another Sue Lin Tan induced crash out. Chapter 45, yeah. Very excited to see where Soulgazer goes with this trilogy. Take a shot every time one of my go-offs features a reading experience with Chloe. You'll die. Wicked Lies of Habren Faire. This is another one of those like sneak up standouts for me. Put on my radar because one of my mutuals had said that it was really good. It very much has those classic Faye vibes, you know, they can't lie, things are very whimsy. Blew my expectations out of the water. I think Anna Fateni's writing style is impeccable and perfect for this kind of setting. I was immediately engrossed in it. I like highlighted a line on like the very first page and I was like, yeah, this book's gonna be good. I know it is. Another one with a female main character that has some very selfish tendencies, but I also think very justified selfish tendencies, making them again more realistic, having some flaws, having things that are relatable. I also really like the depiction of the siblings in this. Our main character is going to rescue her sibling in the Feyland, and they've had a very like tenuous relationship because her sister has always been the prettier one, etc. And although our main character Habren resents her sister sometimes, she's still going to rescue her because it's her sister and she loves her, and that's what sisters do. Back of this describes it as romantasy, but I really think it's more a fantasy with a romantic subplot. I think the role that the romance plays in this could be swapped out for some other aspects, but the romance that we do get in this, parts where I'm swooning, there's other parts where I'm angry, and then there's parts where I'm crying. So another one that caused an absolute crash out. And Anna wanted to make sure that I never forgot about that. I also appreciate that it's a short one. It's less than 300 pages, but what Anna does with those less than 300 pages is more than what some of these authors are doing with 1,000. And yes, this is one that Chloe was reading it when I got surprised with the arc of this one in the mail. So then we were basically buddy reading it and she just was waiting for me to finish it for my crash out. When it comes to some of the contemporary romances that I've read, there was a few that stood out. First one is The Summers Between Us by Noreen Nanja. I think I applied for an arc of it through Penguin Canada, but I also received a advanced listener copy through Libro FM, which is how I started reading it. And it was another one I was reading while I was in the lab. I was in the lab a lot. For a lot of this year. As soon as I started listening to it, I was so engrossed. It was one of those audiobooks too that like once I got home, I just like sat on my bed or on my couch and just stared at a wall while I listened to it. This is a romance between Leah and Wes, who were kids that met at their summer cottages, and it's told in two separate timelines. So we get the young childhood, early teens to late teens timeline, so following them basically through each summer that they had together. And then the second timeline we get is the present. They're 30 years old. We know that something happened that made them basically have a falling out when they were 18, and Leah has not seen Wes since then. She ends up back at the lake house and he is there. I loved it so much. I absorbed it so quickly. I think it's that perfect summer romance. Do you want those like cute first love vibes, or do you want some of that cute second chance adult romance vibes? Oh, you don't have to choose. Why choose? You can get both. Also bonus that they are a Canadian author and this is their debut, and I'm so excited to see what they come out with next. Another contemporary romance that sticks out for me for 2025 is Love at First Sighting by Mallory Marlowe. This is a follow-up to their debut of Love and Other Conspiracies, which I also really enjoyed, but this one just elevated it. She's a social media influencer that is pretty sure she captured alien activity while she was live streaming. He's one of the men in black for the government who are hired to basically keep people who see aliens to hush up. What she saw is something similar that he saw when he was a child and right before his dad died. So he basically volunteers to go see her to investigate. This was so much fun. It was not at all what I had expected, but in a really good way. It was a lot more action-packed than Love and Other Conspiracies, but again, in a really good way. The best way I found to describe it is that it's basically like an episode of The X-Files, except that they actually allowed them to, you know, do it. This book for sure cemented Mallory Marlowe as one of my favorite contemporary romance authors, and I'm really looking forward to her next one, which is Entities to Lovers. One of my major go-offs for this year were stumbling upon and finding Vero Heath's dark mafia romance books. There are 2 duets in her series so far. I think the second one is my favorite, but I love the first one too. I'm reading the first book and the third one right now, and it's also really good. I think Vero is one of, if not my favorite mafia romance author. As somebody who's read a lot of dark mafia romances, she strikes a perfect balance between the dark, unhinged, toxic, messed up stuff with the like tender, heartwarming moments that like has me giddy. Switch it between kicking my feet and clutching my pearls basically throughout these books. They are all available on Kobo Plus. I do believe they're also available in some libraries. I think they're on Hoopla. I could be wrong. And they are also available in French translation as well, because Vero is a Canadian author and she ensures that all of her books do get a French translation. So I think that is an added bonus. You thought I was not going to mention Ava Reid at some point? Theory of Dreaming was the anticipated sequel to A Study in Drowning, which I will give an honorable mention to because I did do a reread of it in 2025 and still incredible. But A Study in Drowning ended on a very ambiguous and I would consider it a bittersweet ending, just in terms of where our main character Effie was, like from a mental standpoint. She had overcame a lot, but she also lost a lot, especially when it comes to the beliefs and the things that she had held on to that really got her through day to day. So when it was announced that Ava was doing a sequel, like I knew it was gonna hurt. Not a happy-go-lucky fluffy sequel, okay? That was not what was set up for this. And Ava delivered on that. There's a reason why they're one of my favorite authors, and it's because they managed to tackle these dark, difficult themes with a lot of honesty and realism and make me personally feel seen in a way that I never thought would be possible in the types of books that I like to read. Our kids are not all right in this, but they do get there. I loved seeing how their relationship and how individually they developed as characters when brought back into the real world outside of the mesocosm of the house that they were in the first book, and I just loved their love. And to wrap this up, I just want to give a few more quick honorable mentions of books that I absolutely loved this year. A Love Most Brutal by Kath Richards. This is described as a mafia rom-com. This is the second book in this series. It follows a different couple than the first, and I really enjoyed the first one, but this one, the dynamic between these two characters, this is my dynamic. The only reason I put this down was because my life forced me to, not because I didn't want to keep reading it. And if you like mafia romances, but maybe not the extra super dark ones, I think this book, as well as A Love Most Fatal, the first one, are great ones to pick up. Tusk Love by the darling Thea Guanzin. No, I love Thea. We know I'm kind of biased towards Thea, but it's what she deserves. Fun, cozy, spicy romantasy. I listened to the audiobook and read the physical book, and the audiobook is a duet style, and it was exceptionally enjoyable. Obviously, if you are a fan of Critical Role, this is definitely one I would recommend picking up. Fun little journey with fantasy characters that we get to watch fall in love. And isn't that all that you want from your cozy fantasies? And the final honorable mention that I will bring up is By the Horns by Ruby Dixon. This was the sequel to Bull Moon Rising, which was one of my standouts from 2024. I love Ruby Dixon, period. But I was so excited to see her get the trad pub, get to expand on a whole new world, because Ruby Dixon's world building is completely unparalleled in my opinion, and she doesn't get enough credit for it. And I absolutely adore the dynamic in Bull Moon Rising, so it was interesting to see what she'd be able to do different in this one, and I think she nailed it completely. In the first chapter, I knew this was going to be up there with Bull Moon Rising. So a big go off to all of those books and those authors. Those were truly my big standouts for 2025, at least in a positive way. It was a great year of debuts and for more Canadian authors and just overall perfection. If you read any of my go-offs, let me know how you felt about them. If you haven't read them or haven't read all of them or haven't read any of them, I hope you were able to add a few more to your TBR for 2026. A lot of excellent books in there that I really think more of you should be reading. Now, before diving into my piss-offs, there's a reason why I'm calling it my piss-offs and not just like my lowest rated books. I definitely read books that are not the most well-written. And at the end, I'm just kind of meh about it. So to me, those aren't the ones that stick out in my mind as like bad reads. They just were what they were. However, there are some other books, some that arguably are bad written, but some that aren't even bad written, but for some other reason just really pissed me off. And like those books that I can't stop thinking about, or the more I think about them, the angrier I get. And those are the books that I actually have something to say about. If you are somebody who cannot handle negative reviews of books, leave. I figure we'll just dive headfirst and start with probably my two most controversial piss-offs. Starting with one that was my second last read of 2025. I'm like terrified to say this, but also not actually because I don't really care. It is Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. Now hold your thumbs. Here's what I will say. This is my first B.K. Borison book, and I feel like I chose the wrong book to be my first B.K. Borison book. If you are going into this explicitly for the romance part of this, I think you'll be fine. I think you'll likely really enjoy it because I enjoyed the romance aspect of it. But this is a paranormal romance. Like, he is a ghost of Christmas past. If you go into this and you read a lot of like paranormal or sci-fi or fantasy and you enjoy world building, it's gonna keep you up at night. Yeah. The time I was spending trying to figure out how this magic ghost world system worked was taking me so far out of the reading experience because I could not move past it because it didn't make sense. And I unfortunately could not just like turn that part of my brain off. Like I have so many questions. He's a ghost, but like in ghost in name only. He's hot and Irish, so he has that going for him. But in terms of understanding how things work as a ghost in this world, you're not gonna understand it, I guess, is what I just have to come to terms with. It was one of those things that like the more I thought about it, the more pissed off that I got and the more insane I felt. The thing too is that I knew there was gonna be multiples in this series, so I was like, well, maybe the next book will look at one of the other Christmas ghosts and it will help explain this. But we're not. We're working with Angel and a Reaper. At least in this one, we had like the human aspect, the human anchor to really hold at least that part of the book together. But now we're going to deal with two paranormal entities in a paranormal world that doesn't make any sense. It takes one of my favorite tropes and does not do it justice at all. Just kind of felt thrown in there to justify what was happening or why it happened. But then it just opened more questions because what does that mean for all the other ghosts? My main takeaway when it comes to like the world building aspect of it is that there just needed to be less, because the more that they expanded on it, the more messy it got, the more holes were exposed, and the more I personally was distracted from the rest of the book. I probably will still read the next one just because of some sick fascination, but also because I really need to know whether those holes get filled in or whether we're just digging more. more, you know? And to confirm, like, this has not thrown me off BK Borison. I do want to go back and read some of their just regular contemporary romances. Like, I feel like I will vibe with those a lot better than this paranormal one. Okay, moving on to my next piss off for 2025. I'm gonna put Deep End by Allie Hazelwood up here. We know I love Allie Hazelwood in this house, and I actually have 3 copies of this book on my shelf. Common thread with books that piss me off is that there'll be one like glaring point or thread throughout a book that just will like irk me. And I'll like try to let it go, but then I'll start talking about it with somebody, and then the more I talk about it, the more it extends, and then I just get more and more annoyed. And in Deep End's case, it's Lucas and it's Penn and that whole dynamic. I was along for the ride, absolutely. I also listened to the audiobook of this one too, and the duet and the male narrator, great, and a great experience, okay? However, the dynamic that is presented in here between Penn and Vandy and Lucas just really rubbed me the wrong way, especially Lucas. Like, why he could not just pull Penn aside and say, hey, by the way, especially because he's portrayed as this big, like, stoic, no nonsense, etc. And he couldn't just pull Penn to the side and be like, hey, by the way, I am seeing Scarlet, and like, this is just not gonna happen. He's supposed to be somebody who doesn't really care about feelings, you know? So like, why would it matter? Like, it just seemed like such an easy solution. I don't know why. And the fact that Scarlet just kind of sat there and took it the entire time also just really pissed me off. And I also feel like Penn's story, like, there's this plot thread that's introduced at the beginning about how Vandy, Scarlet, on the big dive where she got injured, she had lost her chamois that day. It went missing, her lucky chamois. Penn was at that meet, and it all was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, it'll be revealed that she was the one who stole the chamois, blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of all comes to head with this whole thing with Lucas. No, there's never any resolution to that. Who knows? Why are we BFFs with Penn at the end? Why are we still with Lucas at the end? Which, on the note, I saw a TikTok the other day about someone saying couples they don't believe actually would have made it past the end of the book. And they had mentioned Lucas and Scarlet, and I 110% agree. And there were people commenting and were like, well, did you not read the epilogue where they're together in college? Just because I don't think that they're gonna make it past this book does not mean the author doesn't think that. Like, I also just don't think Lucas and Scarlet really had that much in common. They had this like sexual exploration or whatever. So while I enjoyed the reading experience, that one through line, well, it wasn't even a small plot thing. Like, that dynamic is really the central plot of it. And just how poorly I think that it was handled, and how much Scarlet just rolled over and took it the entire time. Pun not intended. Just really was a piss off to me. The next ones are at least less controversial, if that counts for anything. Coming up next on my 2025 piss offs, I have Warrior Princess Assassin by Bridget Kemmerer. I was intrigued by the premise of this. I knew it was like a why choose, and it was one of those ones that I had seen some buzz about. And I will say, the first part of the book, I was hooked. I was really intrigued as to what was going to happen. And then the preceding rest of the book, nothing happened. We walked. There was a lot of walking. This whole thing happens in like less than a week, which in some cases can work, but in this case, all this week consists of is them walking from A to B, back to A, and then A to C. Not much is really happening while they're walking, except that they're horny. Honestly, it's a why choose, but the real dynamic is between the warrior and the assassin. She's just kind of there, our little princess. She's just there for them to toy with in more ways than one. Essentially, it's, how many pages is this? Almost 400 pages of walking just to lead up to a fetishized threesome. One thing that sticks on my mind, and what some of these tabs are, is because I read this when I was in the UK and I made Chloe read certain sections. I was like, you need to start at this tab, then move to this tab and this tab. Princess is exceptionally naive. She's never even shared a bed with a man. She knows nothing, okay? She is a sweet, naive little princess, etc. So tell me why at the end, the first time she's doing it is in this threesome, and they're immediately moving into DP. Not fully, but it just didn't make me feel good. You know, it just really pissed me off. Like, that poor girl, get off of her. Anyways, this is the first in a trilogy or something, and just in case you couldn't tell, I will not be reading the rest of the series. Next up, one of my piss offs. This is more of a piss off because it kind of let me down. I wasn't mad, although I was a little, but I was mostly disappointed. And that is Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stevens. Me and soulmate trope, we go way back, okay? We are BFFs. A lot of you who follow me because of some videos I had made about the soulmate trope. And one of my big gripes about it that I had made a video about was the fact that there wasn't a lot of trad pub soulmate trope. So when I had heard about this book that was about reincarnation, soulmates finding each other through time, but like he has to kill her and everyone, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they wrote this for me. Like, they saw my TikTok. So this was one I most anticipated, so much so that like I subscribed to Owlcrate. This is on me. I pre-ordered all these versions before I read my NetGalley. At the NetGalley, I pre-ordered this edition. I had the Owlcrate edition, which I have now sold, because I just thought for sure, like, you know, you read a book and you're like, no, this will be like my book. I will absolutely love this. Considering it's in this video, yeah, no, it was not my book, unfortunately. Very slow, was very meandering. I thought the writing was very lovely, so there were some really great quotes, but I just felt the relationship between them was very there wasn't really much there. I liked the aspect that it was true soulmate trope, so like they reincarnated as different genders in every world. Didn't matter, but it felt very hollow at times. There was just something that was missing from it, and then the ending reveal as to why this was all happening, equal parts like baffled and like laughing because it was just so bizarre and came out of nowhere. So I just really wanted that soulmate trope. I wanted some, you know, solid representation in trad pub, and alas, my watch continues. This was another like disappointed one, and also just like, I'm really bad for not DNFing books. I want to get better at it, but I'm really difficult of it. But also I'm usually very particular about the books that I pick up. So when I saw this book, I got abducted by aliens and now I'm trapped in a rom-com, which as a big Ruby Dixon girly, but also I love just alien romances, monster romances. I read a ton of them. I was like, oh, this sounds fun. And their Mishaps and Meads series had been on my TBR. I had not gotten around to reading it yet, but I heard a lot of great things about it. The thing that like pissed me off the most was it felt almost like a mockery of the genre in a way, because it just felt like the author was continuously trying to one up the absurdity on every single page. Like it was just adding absurdity in for absurdity's sake just to make it even more wacky or whatever. I think the best written parts of this book were the smut scenes. I think the author nailed those. The main character in this is a PhD candidate in biology, wildlife biology, and as a marine biologist PhD candidate, she said was very laughable, very relatable, and I thought those parts are really well done. But like the rest of it, you know, the bulk of the fun alien romance exploration story was, it just felt like a mockery of the genre. I have seen some other reviews and people who have read the Maid and Mishap series who not enjoy this book either, which still makes me feel like I could go back and read those ones and enjoy them, but it definitely moved them to the bottom of my TBR because it was just so uncalled for. And the last one I'm going to talk about, this one again is more of a pissed off because I was so disappointed. It was one of my most anticipated for 2025, and it was Daddy Issues by Kate Goldbeck. This was her follow-up novel to You Again. I really enjoyed this book. This was her debut, and the one part I really enjoyed about this is Kate's way to make the mundane very romantic, like romanticizing the mundane, the realistic, the kind of everyday love and life that you might experience. Having enjoyed that book a lot, I was really looking forward to Daddy Issues. And while again, this kind of plays around this, you know, more mundane everyday, just did not work this time around at all. I already had a couple red flags pop up when I first was reading it, which was that the whole plot of it is set after COVID. And I quickly realized I do not like reading about that in my contemporary romances. Like that's a little bit too real world for me. Second thing in the writing that really was like the ding ding ding, and like another one that I feel like I probably should have DNF'd at this point, was the overuse of exceptionally modern terms, like modern terminology and slang that will age this book within 6 months. That's probably a bit dramatic, but you know what I mean? Like using terms like OCs for original characters, like with the daughter in this book is like, oh, can I show you my drawings of my OCs? That kind of thing just like takes me out completely. And like, it didn't have to be like that. It could just be like, hey, can I show you drawings of the characters I created or the characters I made up, blah, 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 blah. And it was constant throughout the book, like these just random modern slang stuff that I was like, oh my God. So in terms of plot setup, writing style, those were my two red flags. And then unfortunately, I also just found that it wasn't really a well-rounded, thought out romance. And it's, you know, it was marketed as age gap as well as single dad romance, but I don't think it does either very well. Like the age gap exists, but it's not really like talked about or anything. It's more so focused on the fact that he's a father, but even then, that's not really fully given its time. There's never any interactions with, you know, the child's mother, which I feel like is a key part of a single dad romance, especially if the mother is still alive. I didn't really buy them together as a couple. Like the first time that they hook up it felt so bizarre to me because she basically has a good buzz on and she goes by his place of work, which is Chili's, so that she can use the bathroom in there. He was under the assumption that she came in because she wanted to hook up with him, but she's not thinking this at all in her head until he propositions her. And then she is like, yeah, okay, sure. Might as well. Just for shits and giggles. Didn't love the kickoff of the romance like that. It just didn't quite sit right with me. Although this character is stepping into like a stepmother role, she's not great with kids. She's still very selfish, which I think is valid, but she doesn't see it that way. Like she doesn't recognize that about herself at all. I think that's the problem, is that she's not self-aware at all about her personality and what she wants from life and everything and what this situation means. Her mother and her like cousin are trying to get her there, but she remains like unself-aware enough to be able to really, I think, be mature enough to accept this role that she is now taken on upon herself. A little bit too much realism in that mundaneness, I guess. Okay, we are clearly running out of daylight. If you loved any of these books unconditionally, I'm very happy for you. I think that's great. I personally just didn't. It's okay to not just love every book that you read, and it's okay to be critical about the books that you read and have some aspects that you wish were better or wish that all of it were better. Oh my God, never mind. I forgot almost This is Soulgazer by Maggie Rapier. Another book, the more I thought about it, the worse it got. I had posted when I first finished this book that I had a very weird reading experience with it because I finished it very quickly. I read it in 2 days, but I didn't like it. But I kept reading it because I had to know where it was going. Again, my sick fascination. I also, I think, had to see whether any of it made sense. It didn't. The two main piss-offs for me, first of all, world building, non-existent, nonsensical. Things are introduced that are all of a sudden brought up and then never brought up again. Magic system is very unclear. I think the biggest standout for me though is that this is an awful romance. Like I'm 99.9% sure that our male main character actually hates the female main character, like a lot. He is not nice to her. This is like not what I want a romance to be, but it's being marketed as if this is like the ideal romance. He swipes her V card and jumps out 5 seconds later, leaving her this lump on the bed. She reveals one of her deepest secrets that's like traumatized her entire life, and he immediately goes tells the rest of his crew, even though she repeatedly asks him not to. Nothing in this made me like this character. He's also just a really crappy pirate because he's really just using it as persona. He's not helpful. Yeah, sorry, pirate. Magic person, whatever. At the end, I think it's very clear that he resents her and is going to resent her, and this is a duology, and again, I think I will be picking up the next one for my sick fascination. There's so many things I could go into about this. The prose, very beautiful. I like my purple prose, I'm a fan of that, but I like it when they make sense. And unfortunately, that is not what is happening here at all. A prime example of a book that I didn't enjoy, and then the more I thought about it, the less I enjoyed it. So I can't believe I almost forgot it. Now I'm actually done. That's all of them. Don't take it personally. Critical thinking is dying, so I am going to continue to be critical about the books that I read, and 9 times out of 10 I will tell you about it as well, because again, we need to encourage critical thinking, people. If any of these pissed you off, or the fact that they pissed me off pissed you off, let me know. I hope you had less piss-offs than I did, and I hope for infinitely less piss-offs in 2026. So that is all of them. I ran out of daylight. We had my go-offs, my piss-offs, whole spectrum. Overall, though, 2025 was a great reading year. I'm hoping 2026 will be even better. I'm hoping I will post more long-form content. I was gifted a new camera that allows me to film in both aspect ratios, which will make it easier for me to only have to film once and be able to post on both platforms, so I'm trying. But let me know what your favorite reads of 2025 were, what your least favorite reads of 2025 are, and some of your most anticipated for 2026.